Hi, I'm Shannon Rollins with Shannon Rollins Real Estate, and today I want to talk about why do you need an appraisal and what happens if it comes in low. For sale purposes, if you are getting a loan on a home, the bank is going to require an appraisal be done. In short, they want to be sure that the price that you are paying for that home is a fair, equitable, reasonable price for the home. They want to be sure that if you were to default on that mortgage and the bank had to take the house back, that they can reasonably recover their investment that they put into that property and be able to sell the home again and get their money out of it. So they're going to require an appraisal be done. Now, an appraiser is going to pull 3 sales, and they're looking for the homes that are most comparable to the property that you've written the contract on. They're going to be making adjustments to the sales price of the homes that they have selected to make it more comparable to the subject property which you are buying. Now, different appraisers may select different homes, but if the home is in an area where homes are very similar, it shouldn't matter. The appraisers will still come up with the same adjusted value range for that home. The problem might arise when the home is either unusual for the neighborhood or it's in a rural area. Sometimes homes in the rural areas are remarkably different from each other, with different size, different condition, a different amount of acreage, different features like a barn, no barn. So the values could come out different depending on that appraiser and which comparable sold homes they select. So what happens when the price comes up lower? What do you do? Well, at that point, you really have 4 options. The first is the seller could agree to sell at the appraised value price. Or 2, the buyer could agree to bring the difference in the appraised value and the purchase price to closing in cash if they really want that house. The third option is that you could agree to some compromise. If the house, for instance, was listed at $300,000 and a buyer brought an offer at $310,000 because they wanted the seller to give $10,000 allowance for flooring, or they wanted $10,000 for buyer closing costs for the seller to pay at closing, so they inflated the price. Well, if the price got inflated artificially for that, perhaps you now decide, in order to let the sale go through, to bring the price back down to $300,000. The buyer pay their own closing costs or pay for their own flooring allowance later after closing, and allow it to close out at the $300,000 so they can get the full value that they will loan on the home. So the fourth option then, and this is one we always want to try to avoid, and that is to withdraw from the contract and go find another home. Seller puts the house back on the market. At this point, both the buyer and seller have invested time and money getting to this point of the appraisal. The appraisal doesn't usually happen for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after you're under contract. So the buyer has spent money on home inspection, on the appraisal, they've invested time and energy in this home, and the seller has taken the house off of the market as well and has lost time on the market. So it is really in everybody's best interest if we can come to some compromise to make it still work out for both the buyer and seller. We do this all the time. We try to think outside the box. How can we make this work for both the buyer and seller? If you have questions about appraisals, or if you're thinking about buying or selling, give me a call. My team and I are on standby 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., ready to help you take the smoother road to sold.